Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 and our chats with Emily as we are calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson. We are in the Johnson edition. We turned out a poem 750, Growth of Man Like Growth of Nature. Now, in many ways, we are back in this poem about poetry again. We've seen this a number of times. The scholar Ruth Miller is convinced that's really what we're looking at here. One scholar has called this Emily's credo, and another has talked about Emily's goal of the difficult ideal of being spiritual or poetic growth, dynamism. In many ways, we're back to poem 508. You guys will remember when she played this game. I'm seated. I've stopped being theirs. The name they dropped upon my face with water in the country church is finished using now, and they can put it with my dolls, my childhood, and the string of spools I've finished threading too. Baptized before without the choice, but this time consciously of grace, unto supremest name, called to my full, the crescent dropped, existence's whole arc filled up with one small diadem. My second rank too small the first, crowning on my father's breast a half unconscious queen, but this time adequate, erect, with will to choose or to reject, and I choose just a crown. Now, our assumptions that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net, down the left-hand side, Chats with Emily is our playlist. Hopefully you've worked through our set of introductory comments as well as the preceding 749 poems. We just finished with 749, All But Death Can Be Adjusted. And if you've done that reading, you will not be surprised, as we just said from our study of 508. There's a number of poems that will be echoes here of Emily trying to understand the decision that she's made to be this poet. Now, some will call Emily a recluse. We have, of course, argued against that use of that word. It's not that Emily's a recluse, it's that she becomes withdrawn in a certain kind of almost like monastic type of attitude or spirit. And we're going to see that here. The scholar Wendler has said that Emily creates a resolutely secular picture of the self-struggle toward perfection. I like that line to direct us here. I think this is Emily's dance with Dante as well, the journey towards perfection that we saw in our study of the Divine Comedy we've given for lectures at learnstrong.net. One scholar has called this the anatomy to vocation, Emily's actual calling. This is how she says it. Growth of man, like growth of nature, gravitates within. Atmosphere and sun endorse it, but it stir alone. Each its difficult ideal must achieve itself through the solitary prowess of a silent life. Effort is the sole condition, patience of itself, patience of opposing forces, and intact belief. Looking on is the department of its audience, but transaction is assisted by no countenance. Now, I think this is a compelling idea in that she makes the argument, it seems to me, that from the very beginning, the dynamic growth that one enjoys, especially as a poet for Emily, is much like the growth in nature that we see. And of course, Emily, a great lover of nature. Notice the capitalization of man. In other words, she wants this to represent all humans, growth of all humans, like growth of nature. Notice capitalized, making us think, of course, of her dance with Emerson in his classic essay, Nature. Gravitates, that may be the key word, the scientific language. In other words, there seems to be something natural, she'll argue, gravitates within. Notice all of these words that will play the game of individuality. Atmosphere and sun do endorse it, in other words, helps it to grow, right? Notice it's an it, to not differentiate between male, female. But it stir alone. Again, we'll go from alone to solitary and the like, okay? Each has, she says, its difficult ideal. Now, I think this use of the word ideal and the fact that it's capitalized does matter to us. It is, I think, Emily's study of Plato's Republic, the ideal republic, the ideal spiritual life, the ideal poetic life. Where does all of that start? From within, she'll argue. Each has its, notice, difficult ideal. There's no point in having an ideal for Emily if it's not difficult. It's got to be a challenge. It's got to be something that you strive towards. Again, our Dante comes to mind. Must achieve itself. Notice capitalized. And set off in dashes. Many have said, this is Emily saying out loud, if I'm going to do this thing, called the poetic life. I'm going to have to do it alone. I've got to do it solitary, and it's going to be difficult. But there will be growth. I'm determined, she says. It's a gravitational pull, if you will. Notice, it almost seems as if Emily's arguing that she did not choose poetry, but poetry chose her. In the same way that trees don't choose to do what they do. They just simply grow by virtue of having enough sun and enough atmosphere, right? Notice, it is the difficult ideal that will achieve itself through solitary prowess of a silent life. Now, it is interesting that she argues that spiritual development will happen, or poetic inspiration will happen through a silent life. Now, one scholar has pointed out that Emily was not silent in her youth, apparently, but as she aged, she became increasingly more silent, at least in terms of her talking. Although she shared lots and lots of letters. Well, we ourselves have called our series Chats with Emily for a specific reason. She did a lot of chatting, but most of it happening out of a silent life. By the way, when we get to poem 1225 later in our study, we'll come back to this poem again. She'll say it this way: its hour with itself the spirit never shows. What terror would enthrall the street could countenance disclose. Well, obviously you have countenance in this poem as well. The subterranean fright, the cellars of the soul, thank God the loudest place he made is licensed to be still. And I think, although she doesn't use the word still in this poem, that silence, that stillness is, I think, foundational to what she's saying. However, there must be, if there's going to be growth, there must be effort. Now, she'll say the game is effort is the soul condition. Notice, from solitary to soul. Some have pointed out that this is pure Emily's heritage as a Puritan, raised in a Puritan tradition of what? Effort, patience, belief, all of those ideas. Of course, it's Longfellow's Psalm of Life. Let us then be up with a heart for any fate, still achieving, still pursuing what? Learn to labor and to wait, he will say at the conclusion of that poem. We're playing a very similar game here. Effort is the soul condition, patience of itself, right? In other words, there's something for Emily about the character, fundamental character of the striver that will never quit. Notice itself here capitalized. And then she'll repeat it. Patience of opposing forces. Notice we go from prowess to patience. There seems to be a tension, right? In other words, on the one hand, prowess, struggle, gotta go, gotta go, gotta go. On the other hand, the willingness to say, gotta wait, gotta wait, gotta wait. There is a tension there, which is fundamental, of course, to any kind of growth, right? I mean, think about your own growth, guys, as students. You want to grow, but you also realize that you have to wait to grow. It's like my child that years ago when we planted potatoes, and 3 days later he was out in the garden trying to dig them all up because he wanted potatoes, and we had to explain to him, no, it takes time. You got to wait. Well, this was hard for him, as it's hard for all of us, right? Think about our reading of these poems. We would like to be able to read them and understand them immediately, and for most of us, that's not the way it works. And I think for Emily, in the very producing of these poems, I think she's trying to demonstrate what she is saying, that it requires a certain amount of prowess. It also requires a certain amount of patience, of opposing forces, right? That is to say, there's always the tension. And intact belief. Notice this belief can't be, as one scholar said, not shattered, not crippled, not weak. The belief must be strong. Now, of course, the faith here is, are we talking faith in God or faith in herself as poet? This has always been the debate. And then there's the looking on, right? There's always the audience that we're thinking about, is the department of its audience. And I think here this is interesting. I mean, think about her reading of Hebrews in her King James Bible. Hebrews 11:1, that great cloud of witnesses that are watching from the other side. Think about T.S. Eliot's Hollow Man, those who have crossed with direct eyes to death's other kingdom, remember us if at all not is lost silence, so small the Hollow Man. The idea that there's somebody on the other side watching, and that watching audience, she says, has no, there may be a transaction of a kind, but none of it is assisted by countenance. Notice the way she says it. Looking on is the department of its audience, but transaction, here maybe she's referencing salvation, is assisted by no countenance. By the way, she'll use this word countenance in 20 20 times in her poetry. Face itself is used 150 times. Emily was very, very interested in all of this. Some have pointed out that she may be channeling or referencing or alluding to Psalm 4:6. Lord, lift up the light of thy countenance upon us. Or 1 Corinthians 13:12, for now we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. But notice here there is no countenance. In other words, as Conrad will say in Heart of Darkness, we live as we dream alone. In other words, and I think this is the point of the poem at 2a, the artist's life is a solitary life because the work is solitary. And that's the calling. She says, that's the gravitational pull, back to the opening lines of the poem. Of course, we can think as well about the point that Dante makes, that you don't go to hell but through hell, in our study of Dante's Inferno. At 2b, think about all the words of this poem that show that inner loneliness, the trial of that inner loneliness, within, alone, each, difficult, itself, solitary, silent, effort, patience, all of these words that are pointing towards this life of the artist, of the poet. It is a solitary, it's difficult, and you got to have prowess and patience. One scholar has pointed out that Emily is in this solitary prowess and silent life, invoking what this scholar calls, quote, the monastic ideal espoused by one of her favorite authors, Thomas à Kempis, whose book, Imitation of Christ, made a deep impression on her. Especially relevant are the chapters on solitude, silence, and a retired life. In the last, in which he quotes Peter 2:11, if you will stand fast as you ought and grow in grace, esteem yourself as an exile and a stranger upon earth. And then, as we've said already, Alfred Haberger has called this poem, quote, a major statement that wields the idea of autonomy to vocation. Emily sees herself as called to be this poet. By the way, of course, she loved Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress, and just go back to our study of that. We've given lectures at learnstronger.net on that text, and just watch the ways in which she plays a very similar kind of game. You got to keep going. You got to keep going, even though it's difficult, and you got to have patience while you do it. Finally, at 3b, what are your thoughts about this? Is it a hard journey for you? For example, we're at 750. At 775, we are still 1,000 poems away from ending our study in the Johnson edition. Whew. It's a long, long trek. You're going to have prowess. You're going to have patience to be able to get there with me. Thank you.